Hello and welcome to the Third Sector. I'm your host, Tamara Brinkman. In our society, there are three sectors: the public, the private, and the nonprofit, and it's that third sector that we're here to talk about today. Joining me on today's show is Valeria Shaffer. She is President of Economic Development for Wayne County. Welcome to the Third Sector, Valerie.
Thank you for having me.
Well,
Happy to be here.
we are so happy that we were able to get some time with you today. I'm so excited to have Valerie as a guest. Economic development is a part of our community that is so important. It's vital. It's helping us grow. And so I'm just thrilled to get to learn more about it, why we need it here in the community, and all the wonderful things that you guys have been doing. So with that, why don't we start at when did economic development start to exist here in Wayne County?
Mm-hmm. Well, it went on for many years. I recall conversations about economic development happening in the 70s, but the EDC, short for Economic Development Corporation, we were created in 1993 to formalize and streamline the process in which economic development occurs. So prior to that, it was my understanding that there was a Richmond Chamber of Commerce and the city of Richmond would kind of tackle economic development for Richmond specifically, but I don't think there was an organization focused on it countywide. So back in 1992, a group of community leaders got together and were looking for ways to fund an economic development corporation, and they actually implemented the economic development income tax, otherwise referred to as EDIT in government. And that is 0.25% local income tax that working Wayne County residents pay. So those funds are pooled, and that allows us to have the operating funds that we need in order to exist.
Okay. So how long, you've been at the EDC now as president for quite some time.
Yes, I'm going into my 8th year.
Wow.
However, I've been with the organization for 17 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. It was my first job out of college, actually. I graduated from IU East and went on to be the administrative assistant and project specialist. So just got my foot in the door and was really learning about economic development. And over the years, just took advantage of every opportunity I could for additional training to learn and to grow my knowledge, and just fell in love with the profession.
Wow, it's so exciting. So tell us, why does a community need an economic development corporation?
So we really need a central point of contact for investors, for companies who are looking at the community and wanting more information. They want an entity to somewhat build a business case as to why we are the right location for them to invest, in some cases, multi-millions of dollars. And so we are that centralized point of contact for Wayne County. And so it's our job to maintain information, have a good database of buildings and sites so that when we know the needs of a company, we can really hone in and find the right property for them. And then also, a lot of times incentives are a big factor in companies locating somewhere. We have to kind of compete with other communities who may have similar assets and a strong business case, and sometimes incentives are that tiebreaker. And so our office is in charge of putting those deals together and then ultimately getting approval from our government entities.
Okay. And so how does that process work for you guys? Do you seek businesses out, or do they seek us out, or is it a combination?
It's definitely a combination of both.
Okay.
So over the years, we have had some targeted businesses that we did specifically reach out to. You know, that kind of takes a lot of time to develop those lists, and you hire professionals to cultivate those lists so that we know who are the companies that are growing that are also a good fit for our community. But oftentimes we work with what's called site selectors. These are companies that are hired on behalf of the private sector to go out and seek out their new location. So it's very data driven. Not only do they want to look at the cost of doing business, but they're also looking at the company's proximity to their customers and their suppliers to make sure that logistic costs are kept at a minimum. So there's many factors that come into play, as well as the skills of our workforce and how do those align and translate into the needs of a new company. So oftentimes we're marketing to these site selectors who work with dozens of companies every year and might have a company that's actually looking in the Midwest, specifically Indiana, and might consider Wayne County.
Okay, okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of the projects that economic development, or the EDC, we're going to probably refer to you guys as the EDC because it's a long name. What type of projects have you guys been working on, or what are you that are coming to fruition? Maybe some that we were instrumental in even bringing forward to our community?
So we look at business development as two areas. One is business retention and expansion. So that is really supporting our existing businesses and making sure that they have the tools and the resources that they need to continue to grow and expand their footprint here in Wayne County. So for example, last year we worked closely with 5 companies who collectively invested almost $45 million and plan to create almost 200 new jobs. So those are typically sometimes smaller projects, but collectively make a large impact when you see multiple companies growing at the same time. So that's one primary focus that we do. Another is new business investment. So we've been very fortunate so far in 2023 to have 3 major economic development announcements with a 4th one on the horizon. So the first one is Liberation Labs.
Okay.
They are purchasing 36 acres in our Midwest Industrial Park. So it's important to note that when we look at helping companies find buildings and sites, part of the work the EDC does is also to cultivate that real estate. So for example, last year we just purchased alongside Wayne County and the city of Richmond as our partners 335 acres to expand our industrial park to ensure that we had adequate land available. So as companies are coming in, we're showing them all these various sites that we have under our control that they can then purchase and establish an operation. So Liberation Labs, like I said, purchased 36 acres, and they're in the process of doing all of their site due diligence, and they hope to break ground later on this spring. And they'll be investing about $115 million and creating 45 new jobs.
Wow.
Yes. So we made that announcement in January, and then just on the heels of that, in February, we announced the Viking Group. The Viking Group is purchasing 40 acres in our newly acquired area of the industrial park.
Okay.
And they'll be investing around $63 million and hiring 111 new jobs.
Wow.
So those 2 projects took the better part of 2022 for us to work with those companies, making sure that they had all the information that they need to make an informed decision. So when you see these announcements happen, just know months and months of work go into getting the company to that point where they feel comfortable in making that investment decision.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what's generally the kind of timeline that you're dealing with, and I would imagine it's a bit like a relationship courting.
Absolutely. Yes.
Trying to find all those sweet spots and, tick all the boxes. And quite a sales job at the same time, for the community.
Yes. What I tell people is, the EDC, we're your lead sales team for Wayne County, right? So relationship building is a huge component of that because the company has to trust that what we're telling them, we can deliver upon. So everything from the incentives that have to be approved, because while I put the package together, I don't have the authority to approve it, right? So that's my board, that's the Wayne County Commissioners, that's City Council, the mayor, and so I have no authority in the final approval of those packages. And so they have to have confidence that I have the relationships internally to also garner that support. And then also that our workforce can deliver. So as a community, the workforce is tremendously important because without the right people to fill the jobs, the company can't be successful.
Right.
So then the third project that was announced then in March is Blue Buffalo is expanding.
Yes.
So I was a part of the team that courted Blue Buffalo to locate in Richmond in 2016 is when we made that announcement. The plant opened, I believe, in 2018, and they've just done tremendously well in this location. And so they're actually investing another $200 million in our
Wow.
Richmond plant and hiring somewhere between 50 and 60 new jobs.
Wow. So translate what that money means to the community member. When I hear somebody say, okay, they're investing 115 million or 200 million, like those are big numbers and big dollars. How does that impact the community? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So oftentimes they're using local contractors. You know,
Okay.
sometimes the general contractor is from outside of the community, but they're hiring all local subs whenever they can. So it really does benefit our local contractors and service providers.
Okay.
And then down the road, it could impact other companies that are going to be a part of the local sourcing that a company needs. So for example, our machine tool companies, you know, making tools and dies for our large manufacturers. So it's kind of a trickle down effect when these companies start using, you know, local banks, continuing to use local contractors, you know, as
Right.
they have smaller projects within the plant. So it's really about using local service providers and other companies.
Wow, so I guess I didn't even think about when we hear you say like 45 new jobs or 115 new jobs, that's what's going to happen when they're up and running, right? So in the meantime, there's lots of other jobs that may come along just through the development and the build of the project before
Absolutely.
they've ever hired staff or the
That's
employees.
very true.
Is that
because a lot of times contractors have to hire additional people in order
Right.
to support a big job like that.
right? Right.
And then another impact to the local community is obviously the increase in our tax base. So that these investments will have an assessed value that then they're paying taxes on.
So, question I have for you, a bit about how you guys are funded. So you can talk about that, but I wanted to bring in as part of that question, when you talk about getting with other community members and investing, you know, or purchasing all the land that you needed to purchase, you mentioned tax dollars fund you earlier. How does that all come together? In other words, you know, how does the EDC have enough funds or come to the table with the ability to do those big purchases, and then additionally your funding resources?
So the economic development income tax that I mentioned earlier, that generates, I think, a little over $2 million a year. And so those funds are pooled by what we call contributing towns. So there are 7 jurisdictions within Wayne County that sign contracts with the EDC for us to support them in economic development efforts. And as a result, the residents and their communities that are paying into this tax, they get half of the revenue, and the other half goes to what we call the Consolidated Edit Fund that's maintained at Wayne County government. And so when we have some of these special projects, we do, in addition to the EDC's operating budget, we do have a pool of dollars that we can fund a portion of some of these projects from.
Okay.
However, we did not use those funds specifically for the land purchase. That was a collaboration of Wayne County and the City of Richmond, who split the cost.
Okay.
Wayne County used funds on hand for $2.2 million, which was their half, and the city did a bond issuance.
Okay.
So we're always looking at creative ways to finance projects, and so we're really fortunate in Wayne County to have a solid working relationship between Wayne County government and the City of Richmond.
What maybe explain that bond issuance? Do you know could you, as far as like when you hear that for the city, what is that, you know, what is the viewers like, well, I don't understand what that means.
That means essentially that the city is, they're going to use future tax revenue to pay that bond debt.
Okay. Got it.
So we don't always have funds on hand, but when you have what's called a tax increment financing district, when you create TIF for short, when you create a TIF district, the assessed valuation is frozen, and then any new development, the taxes from that go into a separate fund managed by the Richmond Redevelopment Commission. And so as new companies locate and new taxes are derived from these new buildings, those taxes are pooled, and so the city can issue a bond and then use the future tax revenue from these new projects to pay down that debt. So it's like a form of borrowing, essentially.
Right, essentially. Very complex form of borrowing.
It is very complex, yes.
It is a complex form. I can see that all your years in this position and with this organization and in this work is paid off, because it is very complicated. You know, I think what I'm taking in as we're talking is so much of what is behind the scenes when you hear these wonderful announcements, and they're great, and we have a fourth coming. I wish we could get her to reveal it here today, but apparently not. So, but just the fact that, and then to have 4 in a year, I mean, and who knows, she could have 5 or 6 coming, who knows. But I think that's substantial. This is a community that's needed some real shot in the arm, and I think it's great to see that, you know, your group has been able to help cultivate that for this community. I mean, I think it's game changer. When will some of these, what's the ETA for some of these businesses or to open or for those expansions to kind of happen? I guess what's the soonest, the longest kind of thing we might see?
Well, I think with all 3 of those projects, Blue Buffalo, Viking Group, and Liberation Labs, they all plan to come online at various points in 2024.
Okay.
So think of this year as the construction period into the spring of 24, and then we'll start to see the results of that.
Wow, well, that's not very far away, is it? That's wonderful. Talk a little bit about how you guys are, how you're governed. Tell us about, you know, and how you know, the staff that you have to help you do all this work.
So we are governed by a 12-member board, and we have appointments from all across the county. So we have 1 appointment from Hagerstown, Centerville, and Cambridge Town Councils.
Okay.
We have 2 appointments from Richmond Common Council and 1 from the mayor. No, that's reversed. 2 from the mayor, 1 from council.
Okay.
Then we have 2 appointments from the Wayne County Commissioners and 1 from Wayne County Council, and then 3 appointments from the Chamber of Commerce. So collectively, that makes 12 members, and they bring various degrees of expertise and knowledge, not only from their independent professions and their backgrounds, but also the perspectives from different communities throughout Wayne County. So it's a good balance to make sure that, you know, what we're doing does positively impact our smaller communities as well.
Okay. Wow.
And then from a staffing perspective, there's a total of 5 of us. We've slowly been growing over the last few years because the EDC, in addition to all of the business development work that we've talked about today, you know, I mentioned all the behind the scenes to grow our industrial parks. That takes a lot of work. We're also moving from just a business development focus to expanding the role of the EDC in the community as it relates to economic development. And so we're starting to look at childcare challenges and how we can help be a part of those solutions. Housing, we're working with housing developers. So we're working with them in a similar way that we've worked with investors for them to come and invest in housing. So we're not just recruiting companies, now we're trying to recruit housing developments as well. So with all of that work, we've really had to expand our staff. And so Sarah Mitchell is our economic development manager. She's really my right hand when we look at new attraction projects and putting together that business case, as well as industrial park development and housing. And then we have Teresa Lindsay. She's our business and workforce development manager. So she's primarily going out and meeting with all of our existing businesses to find ways in how we can support them. And then also is engaged in workforce development. So working with our high schools, working with our higher educational institutions to make sure that she's connecting companies to the right training opportunities to support and grow their workforce. And then we have Renee Doty. She is our marketing and communications manager. As you can imagine, we are communicating a lot, not only with external audiences as part of our sales and marketing, but internally, because we are funded by taxpayer dollars. We want to be sure that the public knows what we're doing and why and how we're going about that. And she also manages our Home and Wayne website, which is a talent and recruitment website different from the EDC's primary website, because we realize that we have to recruit talent in order for our private sector to be successful. So we're trying to play a role in that as well.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. And I may be getting this wrong, but I feel at one point there was some incentives for people to relocate, you know, within the country, kind of post-COVID, working, you know, either locally or just relocate here to Richmond. Great place to live, low cost of living is low. Is that still something that's a part of that? Is that still going on?
It is. So that is called the Make My Move Remote Worker Program.
There we go.
The EDC partnered with the City of Richmond to get this program started, and the EDC is somewhat managing the execution of it. So what we're doing is offering people who have remote jobs, meaning they can work anywhere in the country or live anywhere in the country and work for a company remotely. We're trying to attract them to our community. And so our goal is to attract 6 movers. We've had, 20 movers. We've attracted 6 so far. And it's been very interesting to meet with people and hear their story and why they're locating here, and honestly getting away from larger cities.
Yeah. Hearing a lot of that migration. So as we, sorry, I just kind of, I was going to ask you something else, and then my brain kind of did a like, which way to go. With folks like that or programs like that, how do you solicit, or how do we put it out there that, you know, come to us?
So Make My Move is a platform that's what they specialize in. So we pay them administrative fees, and they're handling all the marketing on our behalf. So we can promote it internally to our citizens, so they can help be advocates and promote the program outside to their family and friends that may have moved away or maybe considering moving to this area. But Make My Move invests a lot of money in all the marketing and advertising on our behalf.
And so, I mean, it's sort of obvious, but why is it important for us to be recruiting talent here in our community?
Well, because we've had a declining population since the 1970s. And so we want to reverse that trend. We have more deaths than births every year, and so our community is not growing organically. And so if we want to sustain our population and maybe change the trajectory of that loss, we've got to find creative ways to recruit people to this area. And too often we focused on, well, we'll let the companies who are hiring manage that process. So now we're trying to play a supportive role with the Home and Wayne campaign of providing tools and resources to potential candidates to help them research and see the community in a very positive light through that website. But remote workers, you know, that is a growing segment of the workforce. And so if people are tired of high cost of living in big cities, it's a great opportunity for us to capitalize on that and show them why they would enjoy living in a low cost community like Richmond and Wayne County.
Often we're talking to nonprofits, and so they are always looking for volunteers and people who want to get involved or learn more or participate in some way. The EDC is a little bit different in that way, but talk about volunteerism as it relates to the EDC and the community.
So we greatly encourage our citizens to get out and volunteer. You know, I volunteer myself. In addition to my role at the EDC, I'm on the board of the Wayne County Foundation. I'm on the board of Girls Inc. of Wayne County. And then I'm also chair of the board of the Indiana Economic Development Association. So that's an association of all of my peers. And so it's important to lend your time and your talents to other efforts. And while outside of board positions, the EDC doesn't have volunteer opportunities, but all citizens can play a role in economic development through helping to uplift other organizations, to going out and picking up litter. You know, we all want a clean city. To just being engaged in meaningful ways and contributing and giving back to our community. So volunteering is incredibly important because there's so much work to be done. It's real easy to complain about what's not getting done. So I encourage everyone to take a step into the direction of volunteering to help make a difference and a positive impact.
Right, be part of that change.
Yes.
Help the community out. Yes, please don't just complain. Please take some action. You know, get out there in a positive way for sure. So we have just a few minutes left. I would like to ask two questions. The first is, what would happen if the EDC didn't exist in Wayne County? If tomorrow there was no EDC? Well, I mean, we've talked about a lot of reasons that may support that. But
yeah, I really think a centralized organization that is focused on economic development is incredibly important.
Right.
You know, without the work of us, you know, who would someone contact? They would contact individual communities, likely. But even so, those individuals are not trained in all the aspects of economic development. It really is a profession that does require a lot of training and experience and knowledge about the way in which companies make investment decisions.
Right.
And you know, I see us also as a strong connector within the community. You know, we're involved in so many different initiatives, whether it's working committees or task force, where we see and hear and are a part of a lot of conversations that are trying to make impactful change, and we're kind of trying to put all those pieces of the puzzle together to see where are there gaps. So I think the work of our organization is important to the future of the community.
And in our last little bit here, I think, in 1 minute or so, what do you most like about what you do?
Oh, I love my job. I truly do. No 2 days are the same. We never know what call we're going to get about a new project or something the EDC can play a large role in the community. And so, you know, we're always evolving and changing and growing through our experiences. And I just love the fact that we're involved in so many different facets of the community.
Yeah. Well, that is going to take us to our time today. As we wrap this episode of The Third Sector, I want to thank my guest, Valerie Shaffer, President of Economic Development Corporation of Wayne County. It has been a wonderful time to talk with you. Learned so much today. Thank you very much for your time and coming on the show. And stay well, everybody out there. We'll see you next time on The Third Sector.